request Martin to join Dr. Bandelaria on the stage for a one-on-one interview. We call this segment Martin and Mel.
Thank you, Sir Sandy, and good afternoon again, everyone, and good afternoon, Martin.
Good afternoon.
Yes, it's afternoon. Yes, same time zone as in Perth, right?
Yeah, but I just came from Europe, so
Okay.
about an hour ago, I was starting to fall asleep, but I'm okay now. I'm good again. So.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so this will be the last part of this conference, I guess. So, but the most exciting part, I guess, and I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. So, when Cheryl asked me to to be the lucky person to interview you, I immediately said yes. I consider this as one of the highlights of my career, having this one-on-one interview with you.
Oh, so you mentioned earlier this course from, that course was the first Moodle course.
Okay.
That was the first ever Moodle course that you were talking about.
Yes, okay, that's good.
Curtin.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty famous thing to be in, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good. And we're lucky that we're participants of that course. So, if I may continue, when Cheryl requested me to be the one to interview you, what I did was to crowdsource the questions that others may want to ask. So I use my network in email and also Facebook, and then ask this question in my network. If you will be given the chance to ask Martin a question or two, what would be those questions? Okay? So I was able to get responses, of course, from my colleagues at UP Open University. There were also suggestions coming from the US, suggestions coming from Thailand, and suggestions or questions coming from Malaysia. Okay, so that means to say that it's not just the Philippines asking you questions now, but those who are really interested to know more about Moodle. Okay, so the first question is social constructionist pedagogy still relevant in the design of the most recent version of Moodle? Or something like what your teaching and learning philosophy would enter into the design and development of Moodle?
So yes, human brains don't change as fast as technology changes. Okay, this technology is the same for thousands of years. So the way we learn, social constructionism is just saying that learning occurs particularly well when you are creating things, constructing things in a social environment for others. And so this is the basis of project-based learning, all sorts of inquiry learning, action research, all of these, and most collaborative activities. So even in companies and businesses and everything. So yes, very relevant. Most of the internet is doing that, right? You are empowered on most internet things now to make stuff.
Yeah.
So Facebook, Twitter, everything, social media, you are the one making the content for others. Yes. And so you're learning. In Moodle, it brings those things into one platform, a protected platform, where you can have your students intentionally creating things for another. And it's as relevant now as ever. And I would say...
Will still be.
It's still something most people don't do well in their classes yet. The initial thing that most new online teachers do is, I have to put a textbook. I need to put the information, and then I need to test people on how they're retaining the information. So we call this dump and pump.
Yes.
the activities, the getting students to create lots of things, that's something that we all need to be doing better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's also the reason why UPOU kept on using Moodle, because social construction is at the heart of our teaching pedagogy. Yes. Okay, so let's now go to this concept of openness in Moodle. So how important is openness? I mean, one of the values that you mentioned earlier this morning during your presentation is this concept of openness being integrated into the whole of being Moodle development, design, etc. But exactly being the developer yourself of Moodle, how important is this openness to the development and design of Moodle and in continuously improving the versions of Moodle?
Openness is critical. And thank you, Bob, for talking about the Mozilla example just now, which is a project I'm very familiar with. I've been involved in the Mozilla thing since the 90s, since the mid-90s. And this is a great example of an open project too. The openness is what actually enables so many things. I have never been able to hire hundreds or thousands of developers. Never, even now. And yet we have hundreds and thousands of developers and people contributing, and it's because of the openness. Openness also brings trust. People trust Moodle because it is open. They can look at the code. They know a lot of people are looking at it. Unlike Facebook, who I would not trust with anything. Moodle, the openness is critical, and trust leads to a lot of other things. It leads to adoption, it leads to collaboration internationally, it leads to, there's so many good outcomes. So, Moodle will always be open. Openness is critical. That's why it's one of the values. Yeah.
And if I may add, we as an open university, we are also advocating for openness in the things that we do. And in looking at the quality of output, quality of services, quality of our academic products, being open, the public is your critic. The public is your critic. Therefore, it is very important that what you will offer is something that is of quality. So openness and quality, they always go hand in hand. That's as far as we are concerned. That's why we know that what we can get being product of this many community members of Moodle, what we can get is also a quality product as far as Moodle is concerned.
I would just say, I don't think openness always leads to quality.
Well,
I think you need to manage an open situation.
Yeah, in a way.
Someone needs to be facilitating it because the internet is full of open projects that failed. Well, and making them succeed is part of the structure.
Probably the credibility of the source where you're getting your materials will come into it. Okay. Yeah. So let's go to something that is somehow controversial about Moodle, or about learning management systems in general. There is this criticism that learning management systems are walled gardens. What can you say about it?
Well, that's part of the strength. So there's a reason why we have walled gardens in certain situations. You don't want your little children playing on the street, right? Sometimes you do want them in a walled garden. Particularly for learning, people are vulnerable. People are learning. They're not sure about things. They feel unsure. They may be trying out ideas or saying things, especially in a constructivist environment. You're putting ideas forward. It's not fair to ask a 13-year-old to put this information on the internet. Say, oh yeah, put it in Facebook where it'll be remembered forever by Facebook.com. That's not something you should be telling a 13-year-old. So there is a need for education to have protected space. And that is what a walled garden is.
Yeah, should be, okay.
So in education, there's often a need for that. I would also add, though, with Moodle, you can change the settings to make it as open as you want. If you want to have all your education on the open, completely open to the world, you just have to change some of the roles and capabilities. It is in fact possible to configure Moodle so that anybody landing on your site without even logging in becomes an administrator.
Okay.
It is possible to configure Moodle that way. So you can be as open as you completely want, right? Moodle can be like a wiki if you want.
Okay. So take note, my colleagues at UPOU, and especially the person who asked this question. Okay. So the next question is, how significant do you think is artificial intelligence or deep learning, neural nets, to Moodle analytics? The deep learning concept, those things, in Moodle analytics, because that's something that you're working on now in terms of the future versions of Moodle.
This technology is amazing. It is, and it's not new. There's a research in this AI for 30, 40 years.
Or so, yes.
And in this field, because when I was doing computer science and I was interested in the 90s and the 80s, there's a lot of talk about, we're going to build artificial tutors. We're going to replace teachers with computers. And I never liked this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have nearly 8 billion people in the world. Why should we be all learning from robots? Why can't we learn from each other, from a nice, lovely human being? It just seems that if you want someone to inspire you, if you want a mentor or somebody who gives you this passion, you're not going to get that from a machine.
Okay.
You need a person.
You need a person with a heart.
Exactly. So I still think the technology of AI is very useful, and so it's very probably a good example is like an image search.
Yeah.
So you go on the internet on a search engine, you type in some words, you get images. Now this is a beautiful thing, a very useful tool, like an assistant for us to find images very quickly. It saves us time. It's not telling us what to do. It's not teaching us, it's just helping us. And I think AI should be doing that. And humans are deciding this now. We who build technology are deciding how it should work.
Exactly.
Right? So we have to make this stand. We have to say, we want our machines to do these things. Otherwise, all the dystopias of science fiction, this is not something we want to live in, right? So,
especially now that we are already talking about the fourth industrial revolution and everything is being done by machine, automation and all those things. Artificial intelligence will be very useful, but not in the context of replacing human beings, right? Especially in education and in learning.
Yeah.
Okay, so those who are interested on e-tutoring and i-tutoring, that's something that can guide us. And for those of us who are espousing the invisible teacher, where is my dean, who is into the invisible teacher concept? Okay, so earlier we were listening to your, shall we say, the story of your education, that you were a distance learner during your younger days. So when you designed Moodle, is distance, or was distance education or learning in your mind?
Funnily enough, no. So it wasn't till after I had already developed Moodle that I thought, oh, maybe I wanted to do this because of how I was learning my school up until the age of 12. I didn't make the connection until later. It was just part of me. Like I knew what the possibilities were already.
At that time? At the time, 1999, that was 1999, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
in the late 90s look, in the early 90s, I was using the internet since 1985.
When it was born? in the Philippines.
I was using the internet when the whole of Australia was on one dial-up modem. Remember the dial-up modems?
Yeah, right.
Those things. The whole of Australia on one of those. So I was using the internet then. I was setting up bulletin boards in Perth. in the 80s. I was very much there at this beginning, and even then I was already having very high quality conversations with people online. Two-way, we were collaborating, we were building things together. Has anybody here ever been in has ever heard of or used a MUD or a MOO? M-O-O or M-U-D? So these are like virtual worlds implemented in text. So imagine a chat group, but in that space, you can make objects and they're persistent. You can create something and describe it, and it becomes like an adventure game. So these things were quite popular in the 80s online, the early internet. And so I already knew this rich interaction was possible. And yet, when the web came, when Netscape 1.0, their first browser came out, they kind of killed all that because people started to discover the internet then in the 90s, and their first impression was, oh, the internet is where you get information. And it became a transmission. And I was like, no, it's an interactive thing. It's interactive. So I was really always interested, how can we make the internet much more interactive? And that's why I started to build Moodle.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so distance education was not there during the first time that you developed or thought of Moodle, right? But it so happened that the distance education institutions became the, shall we say, the biggest market, the big market of Moodle as the learning management system, because big open universities are using Moodle. Yeah, especially in our case here in Asia. Every time we asked the other open universities here, asking them, okay, so what LMS are you using? And they will always tell us, it's Moodle. So even here in Asia, Moodle is a big thing among open universities. Okay, so the next question actually is, what guiding principle does Moodle take in deciding what educational technology feature you would add in the development of latest versions of Moodle?
Yeah.
So what are the guiding principles? Like you decide to add this feature, that feature. So how do you decide those things?
Right. So generally, underneath everything, there is some connection to reality. And what I mean is basic physics, sociology, psychology, how our brains work, how people function, how we communicate. Like, there's basic principles. And this is, when you use some science, sometimes